Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I'm going to be reading you a true crime story from the book True Crime Stories, True Crime Anthology, Volume 8. If I do pronounce anything wrong, I really do apologize. The abduction and murder of Katelyn Collman. Katelyn Collman lived with her mother in a semi-rural area of southern Indiana. For the most part, the town of Crothersville and the rural area around it where Katelyn and her mother lived were fairly safe with very low crime rates. Everyone knew each other and very few serious crimes took place. The scourge of crystal meth has moved into the area, but it has yet to create any major disturbances for the people of Crothersville. Because of that safety record, Katelyn's mother gave her more freedom than she would if they lived in a bigger city. Katelyn was regularly allowed to make the short walk alone up the road to the dollar store. When she made the short walk on the afternoon of January 25th, 2005, she never returned. Katelyn's frightened mother called the sheriff's department, who responded quickly since a child was involved. An Amber Alert was made and volunteers came from across Indiana and Kentucky to help find the missing girl. The police had very few clues to work with, other than she was last seen in the passenger seat of a white pickup truck being driven by a white male. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department immediately put together a suspect list that was as long as it was scary. Most people were unaware that so many sex offenders lived in such a quiet county. But the list also included most adult males who lived within a few miles radius of Katelyn. One of the men on the list who piqued the interest of the investigators initially was a man named Anthony Stockelman. Although Stockelman did not live in the area, his mother did, and he visited her frequently. Stockelman also drove a white pickup truck. Despite fitting the profile of the killer in some ways, in many other ways, Stockelman did not. He had no serious criminal convictions and no sex offenses on his record. Those who knew him also did not think he was capable of such a horrible crime. But as some of the investigators urged the others to focus on Stockelman, they were all surprised by a confession from a man who was not initially a suspect. As some investigators were eyeing Stockelman, a 21-year-old man named Charles Hickman walked into the Jackson County Sheriff's Department headquarters and confessed to Katelyn's murder. A background check revealed that Hickman was an unemployed high school dropout with no record of sex offense. Hickman's lack of sex offense on his record was a reason for the detectives to be skeptical, but they first wanted to hear his confession before they made a judgment. Hickman told the investigators that Katie witnessed a backwoods crystal meth deal which he was involved in, so he grabbed her and forcibly removed her from the scene, ostensibly so that she could not be a witness to something she already witnessed. He then claimed that as he was holding her, he accidentally bumped her into the river. Hickman's story sounded good initially and surely took into account the problem of crystal meth production in southern Indiana, but there were just too many holes in it for it to be believable. Hickman's account did not explain the DNA that the killer left on Katelyn. The DNA did not match Charles Hickman's. Everyone following the case was astounded that a young man who was innocent would confess to such an awful crime. Was it a cry for attention or help? No one knew for sure because Hickman refused to speak with the media. But one thing was for sure, the Jackson County investigators wasted precious time focusing on him. Even though he appeared to be very cooperative, he was doing about the worst thing possible for the investigation, said Stephen Pearson, the county prosecutor, at a news conference, estimating that the delays had cost up to $100,000 in wasted investigative effort. We would have gotten where we are a lot sooner if it hadn't been for him. After Hickman was ruled out, the investigators turned their attention back to their initial suspect, Stockelman. In nearly every way, Stockelman did not fit the profile of a child rapist and killer. He was 38 years old and had no record of sex offenses. In fact, Stockelman had no criminal record whatsoever. He was gainfully employed as a factory worker and had 2 young sons. Anthony Stockelman certainly did not fit the profile of Katie's killer. Thankfully today, Often enough, investigators do not have to rely on offender profiles alone. All suspects in the case, including Stockelman, gave DNA samples to investigators. Stockelman's DNA profile matched the sample recovered from Katie and on a cigarette butt taken from the location where her body was discovered. Anthony Stockelman was charged with first-degree murder and faced the death penalty as he quickly became the most hated man in the state of Indiana. As Stockelman sat in an isolated cell block in the Jackson County Jail, his lawyers knew that their case was nearly hopeless, and about the only thing they could hope for was to get their client a plea bargain and that avoided the death penalty. Since trials take a lot of time and energy that can be a drain on the victim's family, plea bargains are often discussed with the family victims and reached to save more mental anguish. By April 2006, Katie's family was ready for the case to be over so that they could move on with their healing. Plea bargain was reached whereby Stockelman would plead guilty to Katie's murder to avoid the death penalty, instead receiving a sentence of life without parole in the Indian Department of Corrections. "There will never be closure for us," said Katie's father, John Neese. On the plea bargain, a little satisfaction, yes. Once the agreement was reached and Stockelman was formally sentenced by a judge, he was taken away to serve his sentence. The Indiana Department of Corrections is populated with some pretty hardcore inmates. The Chicago gangs, especially the Gangsters, Disciples, and Vice Lords, are well represented throughout the prison system, as are a number of white gangs made up of good old boys from southern Indiana. The different gangs clash from time to time over drug, turf, and race, but they all agree on one thing: child molesters and child killers are the lowest of the low. Child predators can only expect to be the prey in most prison systems in the United States, and Indiana is no exception. When Stockelman entered the system because of his life sentence, he was immediately sent to the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. The Wabash prison is the toughest in the state, full of gang members, lifers, and inmates who assaulted other inmates and staff in other facilities. Wabash's reputation made it the subject of several episodes on the MSNBC documentary television program Lockup. The inmates of Wabash are well aware of who Stockelman was, and needless to say, they were not happy when he entered the doors of their home on September 22nd, 2006. When Anthony Stockelman arrived at Wabash, Jared Harris was a tough 22-year-old from southern Indiana. He was originally sent to prison in 2000 for burglaries, but had time added to his sentence for numerous infractions and was ultimately sent to Wabash due to his disciplinary record. Jared Harris was also a distant cousin of Katelyn Collman. When Harris heard that Stockelman was headed to Wabash, he did not think he would see him since it is a fairly large prison. It was unlikely that they would end up in the same cell block, but there was a chance, and no one in the prison knew that Harris and Katie were related. To Harris's surprise, Stockelman was housed in the same cell block as he was, so he decided to make his move as quickly as possible. Harris watched Stockelman all day, and when the child killer left his cell, he slipped in and waited. After Stockelman returned, he was surprised by Harris, who grabbed him from behind, closed the cell door, and said, "I'm either going to stick you and leave you bleeding, or I'm going to tattoo you." Stockelman chose to live. When Stockelman emerged from his cell, the inmates in the cell block were amazed and humored by what they saw. Tattooed across Stockelman's forehead in capital letters was the word Katie's, with the word revenge below in smaller capital letters. Stockelman was immediately taken into protective custody, and the state has agreed to remove the tattoo. Jared Harris is now a legendary figure in the Indiana Department of Corrections, but he would probably trade away his prison fame for Katie's life. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.